Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Now, in this essay, I'd like to talk about something I've raised before. It's female college students, screwing the academic staff, the professors, the lecturers, and so on, in order to get good grades. Now, so I'm talking and I've had a few conversations with different women about this. Another one very recently, where the woman now in her, mid-50s, I guess, who probably would have been quite hot when she was younger. She was saying that it was quite acceptable, and again was talking about it in a very matter-of-fact tone, which is what I've got from other women. They're not sort of guilty about it or blushing with shame or regret or anything like that. There's no hey, I could get a better grade by fucking the professor, and that's fine. What's wrong with that? Any girl who could do it would have done it and did do it. Too bad for the ugly chicks, but and so on. So the conversation was again very blasé and matter of fact, and so when something like this which is consistent with other women I've spoken to, where they would say, well, look, we were the first tranche of women who came in, once the affirmative actions things started to begin, certainly in Australia in that time. And it wasn't so much women getting affirmative action gigs in science or something like that, or STEM stuff. That was still 99.9% male. But there was an explosion of arts courses, peace studies, sociology, that sort of thing, and that's where the girls typically went, literature and so on. And a lot of the girls went there. I'm recalling my own sort of. A lot of girls went there for the fun time of it, lots of parties and also, back in the day, and I'm sure this still goes on, and you certainly see this in the third world countries. The reason girls go to university isn't for an education or anything like that. The reason they go is to catch a rich husband, and that was the attitude back in the day that I recall, was that the brightest men went to university, and the brightest men typically, on a relative basis, typically had got the best jobs and had the best incomes and lived in the nicest houses. So if you were a girl who wanted to make a career of marriage, which many girls did then, by the way, some still do now, not as many as then, but then you would go to university, and that you'd catch your rich husband there and marry him, and this was before divorce became a real big thing. And if you'd married him, and so then you could always leave him a few years later and get a free house. So all well and good. But so a lot of girls weren't there for an education. Some were, but there's many that weren't. And again, they were affirmative action waved through. Girls from poorer circumstances and suburbs and schools that typically didn't produce academic excellence, they were getting a disproportionate amount of the entries into university, whereas kids from the wealthier areas wouldn't. You actually did have to be very good if you came from a wealthier area. So anyways, this lady's talking about, there was some other ladies there again. All of them had a college degree, so they were all talking about it. And this idea was that, look, I'm at college, I want to have a good time, I want to party, and I want to do this, I want to do that. I don't want to have to bust my ass studying and attending lectures. So how can I get a pass given I'm not prepared to put in the work? So that was sort of rationale number one. Rationale number two was from people who probably would have passed, women who would have passed, but who wanted a better job. Now they worked out pretty quick that the only people that were getting the jobs out of university are the students that had the distinctions and the high distinctions, and the very top sort of grade of marks, ducks of the school and so on. And So they said, well, was one woman saying, well, I wanted one of those good jobs, but I knew I couldn't get it. I'm not clever enough. And quite apart from that, I'm not prepared to bust my ass studying every day. These dorky, nerdy guys can bust their ass and that's fine. So they went through various things. So with their essays and assignments, they would get, the guys to help them. Some guys were so socially naive and stupid, you could sort of infer that they would get sexual favours. Get them to do the work, but then you wouldn't give them the sexual favour at all. So it was like leading them on and deceiving them. But then they'd be no good for the next time because they'd be onto your game. But the best way to do it, they found was you do a bit of seducing other students and so on. But the woman who again is in her mid-50s now, she sort of tossed her hair and sort of made out that I was a fucking seriously hot piece of ass back in the day, and I could have any guy I wanted. I knew the lecturers and the professors were salivating over the thought, and I'd go in an ass cheek short dress and show off lots of leg and the plunging neckline, the whole business. And I knew I could have them. Also, it was interestingly, the women mentioned that it was also a power thing. They enjoyed the power they had over men. So here's this professor or lecturer who ostensibly at least has the power in the situation, but once it goes into a sexual domain and they're giving a favour in return for a service, which in this case is getting a good grade that they wouldn't ordinarily deserve or get, then the power has changed. They now have the power to either give or refuse the sexual favour and to make sure that, no, I'll fuck you, but you need to give me the good grade first, that type of stuff. So, and they would pick their targets. They would talk about the real geeky, dorky men who never really had much in the way of sex, and the men who could never get a hot chick like that, never a young hot chick to boot. So they were quite sort of Machiavellian and cunning and in the way they went about it here, or one in particular of the women I was talking to, and so they would try and pick the dorkiest professors and lecturers, the ones that they could most easily control, and it was clear that they acquired a certain contempt for these people. That sure, they might have the brains to get some long-term gig at a university as professor, and they had the power to pass or fail you, but really they were just pathetic nobodies. They've never had a really good fuck in their whole lives, and this sort of stuff. So they talked about them with barely concealed contempt, really, and how they manipulated them and controlled them in order to get their passes and so on. And if their control of the guy was complete enough, then they could just goof off and party the whole time. And somebody said, well, you didn't really have to fuck them. You could just give them a hand job in their car in the parking lot, and that was enough to get. Some could go very cheaply. Something that was interesting here. I'm not sure I understand this, but they were talking almost like hookers the way they were. They didn't like full body sex, the missionary position, and they didn't like that because it involved kissing, which they perceived as intimate. I guess it's no question it is. They perceived as intimate, but yet they perceived fellatio, which I would rate as intimate. They perceived fellatio as not being intimate or much less intimate, and they perceived that to be in the same league as a hand job in the car. So I was a little perplexed by that, because I would perceive something like that as quite intimate. But there you go. It's only me. So they were talking about how completely acceptable it was. The reality is we need to pass the test. I've got the expense on time I've gone to. I need to show something for it. So we need to get a degree, and I need to get a good degree if I want to get that job. and so on. So if I got to fuck a few lecturers and a professor for it, well, hey, fine. I'm at college anyway. I'm fucking plenty of guys. Why would I care about if I fuck one more? Yeah, I sort of asked about, well, gee, some of these guys, you're like 21 and they're in their mid 40s and not keeping very well and pasty faced and unfit and unkempt and looking like the professor type nerd. Why would you want to? Why would you want to fuck somebody like that? Hey, so I can get the fucking degree, you idiot. So that was the now these aren't the only women, and I'm thinking it must have been incredibly widespread because there are women I knew from college and who I met subsequently, and this is before the mass affirmative action thing was going on, and I thought, really, you're so fucking dumb. How did you get through college? And the reality is they probably were. There's another one that I saw. There's a lady who I wouldn't call her beautiful, but there's something very sexy about her, and I kind of can't put my finger on. And she fucked her way through college and came out with a master's in literature or something. and then she so that was her path or trajectory for the rest of her life, was finding powerful men to fuck so she could extract all sorts of favors and monies from them. She was so careless of money, though, even though she'd been showered with gifts of jewelry and houses and cars, she'd managed to blow the lot partying and having a good time. So there you go. But it seems like it's very widespread, and I assume it's far more widespread today, given the low quality of students that are there. They talked about, these women talked about other girls who'd wanted to fuck the lecturer, but they were so unattractive and so socially clumsy themselves and so sort of unaware of how to do it or how to go about it, that they didn't get anywhere with it and resented the good, better looking girls from because they were able to entice the professors and the lecturers into a sexual relationship and in return for the good passes. There were, and interestingly too, there were some girls they recalled that were very bright and could do it on their own without having to do it. But they were rather resentful and jealous of these bright, hardworking girls. But they took solace in the fact that those girls, in their view, at least those girls were decidedly unattractive and couldn't have got laid anyway. So it kind of didn't matter. But I'm doing this essay in as much as it now seems. Something I hadn't really thought about as a kid, but it now seems that in that time, 30, 40 years ago, those sorts of things, that these women were, or it was widespread, where at the time where low IQ women were or lazy women, either or both, were exchanging sexual favors for passes and high distinctions and so on. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.